3 of Grand Prix Oklahoma City. This is the modern format. I'm Ben Seck. This is Jacob Van Lunen. We have quite the master actually in the feature match area.
Yeah, Yuta Takahashi has won multiple Grand Prix playing Fairies. He's kind of the one who unleashed the Fairy menace on Standard a few years ago, or many years ago at this point, almost a decade. Yuta has done very well both on the Pro Tour and Grand Prix circuit over the years. He's starting things off with an Inquisition here.
Yeah, so showing him like a Voice of Resurgence, a Pierre and Kieran Nalar, and a Tireless Tracker.
Yeah, now Tony's deck is really weird. It's like full of a ton of different one-of creatures. Some of the 4-ofs he have, it consists of cards like Birds of Paradise or Voice of Resurgence. He's using cards like Court of Calling or Eldritch Evolution to put together a lot of different creature combos. He can end the game with things like Kiki Chiki or just lock his opponents out with something like Magus of the Moon.
Okay, so Yuta follows up with another Inquisition. So he knows he could take the Tireless Tracker.
It's also very nice at this point that Yuta knows that he will not have to really face any pressure until turn 4 unless Tony's able to find something off the top of his library here.
So Yuta uses the Scalding Tarn to search for a Guru Island, the best of the islands.
I think that is the best island.
One thing I love about the Guru, it's got that foil stamp on it, and it looks really, really great.
Ooh, wow.
As Ancestral Visions, it suspends. So that will come off in 4 turns and draw him 3 cards. Tony's mana base, no slouch itself. It's just all expeditions.
Both these people with some nice-looking cards here in front of us. That foil Voice of Resurgence is also quite beautiful, must say.
So he searches out a stomping ground. So Tony's deck, how does it win? Well, like what's the way it actually finishes the game there?
So I think that the most kill you all at once kind of play it can make is it could cast Restoration Angel on its opponent's end step, and then on its own turn it could use Kiki Jiki to create infinite angels, thus killing the opponent. But it can also just win by playing creatures and kind of outvaluing the opponent with cards like Tireless Tracker or Nissa Vastwood Seer even. The toolbox capability of the deck is quite strong also, so there are a lot of decks that it'll play against where a card like Eidolon of Rhetoric could just end the game, or a card like Angel of Sanctions could get him right back in a game that he would otherwise be losing. Spellskite can come in against something like Infect. So he has a lot of play against a lot of different things. The problem is that he really needs to connect the right puzzle pieces with each other.
So Yuta plays Bitter Blossom. This card was, one of the most feared during its time in Standard. Is it still good now?
So it was unbanned, in the past couple of years, and it hasn't seen as much play as a lot of people might have thought it would have. But it is an extremely powerful card that provides, pressure over a long game. It provides you with an infinite stream of chump blockers. It's just incredible alongside a card like Spellstutter Sprite. It's really one of the key ways that this Fairy deck wins, because Fairies can just put the Bitter Blossom down on the table and then rely on that for all of their offense and defense, while they just play interactive spells that prevent the opponent from getting any sort of advantage.
So Tony plays a Tireless Tracker, has a fetch land to trigger getting a clue. So Yuta just fetches a Watery Grave in response. So using I believe that's a Windbrisk Heights to get a forest.
Yeah, Windswept Heath.
Oh, Windswept, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Windbrisk Heights is the cool one that puts Emrakul into play for free.
So in addition to the chords, from the name, it's Kiki chord deck, he's also playing Eldritch Evolution. Is this kind of a common addition to this kind of deck?
I believe so. I think Eldritch Evolution is a really powerful spell. I think it works especially well alongside a card like Voice of Resurgence. It just gives this deck the tutoring power that it needs to really find the creature combos that make it so powerful, because his deck is not really all in on the Kiki plan as much as some of the other versions of this deck have been in the past.
You're ready with his Bitter Blossom, Fairy Rogue tokens.
And that Fairy Rogue token looks like it's done its fair amount of work over the years. And I'm sure that it has.
So right now, Yuta seems a little bit short on mana. He's casting a Collective Brutality.
And no escalate.
Right. So he actually has another Collective Brutality, another Bitter Blossom, but as you can see, he did not play a land that turn, so he's not able to cast multiple spells. Now Tony with a Pia and Kira Nalar, putting in 2 Thopters into play.
And Yuta can simply, use that extra copy of Collective Brutality here to kill the 2/2, and those 2 1/1 flying tokens are not overtly relevant considering the Bitter Blossom that Yuta has in play.
Yuta's really, really waiting for that Ancestral Visions to come off suspend. He wants it to get the 4th and 5th land.
Yeah, he's been unable to double spell. He's placed so many 2-mana cards in his deck and hasn't hit that 4th land. And I'm sure he's also playing 4 copies of Cryptic Command, which, if there's anybody you're afraid to maneuver a Cryptic Command, it's got to be Yuta Takahashi.
So Yuta's actually he could have brutality'd the Pia and Kieran, but he actually has a Spell Starter Sprite in his hand and would rather actually just counter any potential threat.
Yeah, and that seems wise. One of the major issues is that Spell Starter Sprite would be unable to counter something that costs 5 mana, and Tony and Lee's deck has access to cards that cost 5 and more mana. However, this play, I think it may actually be safer against the majority of top decks that Tony could draw.
Tony does have a Chord in his hand, so he can actually make it for larger than 5. Sacks a Clue.
Would all mid-shift side event judges please report to the red side of the stage?
I think Tony realizes he needs to really start putting some pressure onto Yuta, because as soon as those Ancestral Visions start coming off. So that's an Eidolon of Rhetoric.
It's kind of bottom of the barrel as far as cards go against Fairies.
Yeah, I think he just cast it because it's one of his bullets that he has in the toolbox. But then, Yuta basically knew that he's going to be short on mana, so he just runs out his Spell Starter Sprite.
I've some moments with Yuta over the years. I beat him in the finals of a Pro Tour.
Whoop.
He's a very talented pianist.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who's his teammate in that Pro Tour?
Sorry.
Yeah. Oh.
Jeez, now I'm drawing a blank.
Sorry to put you on the spot there, Jake.
No. I know. I'm sorry. My brain is so locked in on this game right here.
So Yuta having that Ancestral Visions come off suspend now actually has his 4th and 5th lands in his hand, and the Cryptic Command that really will kind of be the final nail in the coffin should he be able to get out of the current board situation, because Tony's almost out of resources.
Yeah, I mean, Yuta pretty much has this one at this point, I think. It's interesting, though, because his life total is dwindling. Tony has ways to pressure it. And Tony's deck also has the capability to play at instant speed, which is one of the best things that you can do against a deck like Fairies, because they're relying so heavily on passing the turn with opening mana and really punishing their opponent in that way.
So Yuta attacks with 3 Fairies. Tony decides to trade at least one of them for the Spell Starter Sprite. Any reason why he wouldn't trade 2 there?
Well, I think he's going for a specific racing math situation. So he's thinking, okay, Yuta's life total is 15. My life total is 17. Let's figure out how many I have to block to put myself in the perfect situation where he's going to end up at 0 before I do. And going through the math iteration of the cards that are in his deck and what he has in play, he decided that trading with a single copy of the Thopter with one of those Fairies would be ideal.
So Tony plays a Windswept Heath. Just passes the turn over, and Yuta, his Fairy army continues to grow.
Another reason why Tony may have traded with the Spell Stutter there is that he's afraid of the Spell Stutter somehow returning to Yuta's hand via something like a Cryptic Command, via something like Ninja of Deep Hours, which is a card that you do see at a Fairies sometimes.
That would be very cool to actually see a Ninja there.
Yuta doesn't seem like the type of person who would put Ninja of Deep Hours in their Fairies deck, but I've certainly lost to it on Magic Online. Somebody spell stuttered, one of my spells, and then ninja'd it back to their hand, and it feels really gross.
So Tony has 2 cards in hand, I believe. No real way to put a dent in Yuta's defenses right now.
Yeah, however, one of those cards that he has in his hand is Court of Calling, I believe, right?
Yep, that's right. And he casts it right now.
Yeah, so he's courting for 4 here. And
You're just fetching a land with this Scalding Tarn. Oops, only 1 land.
And I can expect that he's going to counter and draw here with his Cryptic Command, but that leaves shields down. Means he has no mana tapped.
No, so I wonder what's the worst thing that can happen now that Yuta uses the Cryptic Command. Tony now has all his mana available, so if there's a turn that's like crucial for Tony to be able to push an advantage, it's got to be this turn right now.
And his deck has so many 1-ofs that I'm not even going to...
Okay. Tony untaps.
Looks like he does have a Kiki-Jiki in hand.
Now, Kiki-Jiki, I believe, cannot copy legendary creatures, so
It cannot.
So it doesn't really have a great target right now. Yeah, and he sacks the Horizon Canopy because I don't think the options he has right now are really what he wants. That really doesn't bode well for him.
No, not at all. He has a single copy of Path to Exile in hand, but that's not the type of rules play you're looking for against an army of fairy tokens.
So Tony's tapping 3 mana. He's playing Eldritch Evolution, sacrificing Pia and Kieran. So Eldritch Evolution allows you to search for a creature that costs 2 more than the up to 2 more the cost of the creature you sacrificed. Goes for an Angel of Sanctions.
Nice.
It seems like a fairly new addition to this kind of deck.
Yeah. Would have been really nice if you accessed something like Inferno Titan there. You only get so many slots, though. Angel of Sanctions does seem like it could be a pretty powerful card, though. It dodges Fatal Push. It's bigger than Lightning Bolt. Your opponent's almost always going to have to use 2 cards to get rid of it, unless they're playing, Path specifically or Terminate. And because of that, it just makes it a pretty powerful card. It's especially very good as the last card in your hand, I imagine.
Yeah, no, it doesn't look like Yuta has that many clean answers to Angel Sanctions in play.
Yeah, I imagine that Cryptic Command really is his primary answer to a card like that.
So it looks like he's getting ready to cast Collective Brutality, may escalate it. He's casting that. He's escalating twice. So what that likely is it looks at Tony's hand for a instant or sorcery. It -2/-2 to target creature, which is doing that on the Thopter, and may actually be draining for 2 as well.
Yeah, and that seems pretty strong here because Tony's life total, as we know, it's dwindling down further and further, and he's only going to be able to block 1 of these fairies per turn. And he doesn't necessarily want to be playing a game wherein he's, attacking into this force that Yuta's put together. So
the Brutality actually misses in hand. So there's Nissa Vastwood Seer and a Kiki-Jiki in hand. So both of those are creatures, so are not able to be taken by the Brutality. Wow. Yuta casting Liliana de Vale, minusing, meaning that Tony could have to sack his only creature. Now that one will come back, but maybe the damage is already done here.
And I mean, it's going to require a whole turn to make that come back. And right now, he's really going to want to use his mana to play Nissa and turn it into a Planeswalker and then, find an answer to this situation. But he's at 4, and there's 4 points of flying power on Yuta's side of the table. So
yep, and Yuta also having a Ancestral Visions coming off suspend as well. So really totally dominant position right now. Both the creatures in Tony's hand not very useful right now.
Then Angel might be able to buy him a turn or two. The problem is that Yuta could have any number of answers. He could have another copy of Liliana, a Cryptic Command, something like that. And if he does, this game could end really quickly.
Yeah, if he puts the Angel back into play, what's he likely to actually exile that's relevant here?
Say a fairy token?
It's probably true because otherwise he's going to be too low, get run over. But that's not the best use of Angel of Sanctions, obviously. Okay, Angel of Sanctions comes back. He's targeting... I'm thinking the bit of Blossom again. Yes, no, yes. Okay, so takes the Bitter Blossom. So now, at least on the board, Tony will survive one turn. So the Ancestral Visions comes off. Tony drawing 3 cards and then a 4th for his draw step.
Yeah, I mean, I think Yuta could just activate his Mutavault and win this game right now, too.
That's right. Has a Mutavault down there, and pretty sure... I think he's pretty sure that...
Oh, he has Creeping Tarpet also.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
So he really had that all covered. So Yuta Takahashi takes the first game against Tony Lee with Kiki Cord. We're going to have a look at another match happening in the feature match area. It's Dustin Gault playing Grixis Fairies. Well, there's a lot of fairies going in the feature match. Versus Yoshihiko Ikawa playing Red-Green Tron.
If you're the Japanese contingent of the tournament, Ikawa and Takahashi are the 2 Japanese players that made the trip out here to Oklahoma City, both playing here in round 3. Ikawa choosing Red-Green Tron as his weapon. And Yuta, as always, making us happy, playing Fairies. It's weird. Fairies is almost certainly less than 1% of the metagame here, right? And we have 2 Fairies decks in the feature match area right now.
So Dustin's playing Grixis, which is obviously a little bit different. I wonder what kind of the additions he's made to the deck with the red splash.
I mean, a card like Kolagon's Command fits extremely well into the Fairies toolkit.
Yoshihiko playing a Thought Not Seer. And so seeing a Thought Seize, a Spell Stutter Sprite, Vendilion Click, Sow of Temptation, and a Counter Squall. I think that altar is a Spell Stutter Sprite, but I'm not positive. But it looks like that.
Yeah, I also believe that to be a Spell Stutter Sprite.
So, Yoshihiko has actually set up Tron. He has all the 3 lands he's required. So 2 of them actually tap for 2 and 1 taps for 3. So didn't actually use a card like Map to actually have to get it, so he just got it naturally.
And I think Tron may actually be, in terms of like pound for pound playability these days, Tron's very tier 1. This is a deck that has, oscillated in terms of power level over the years. I think as more focused combo decks become more popular, it kind of wanes in popularity. Gift Storm is still a thing, but I think that Gift Storm will be significantly less popular here this weekend than it would have been had the tournament been a month ago. And Tron just, is thrilled to play against control decks or creature decks for the most part. There are obvious exceptions.
Yeah. What other matches besides like Gift Storm are problems for Tron?
There are a lot of decks these days that play 2 to 3 copies of Blood Moon in the main, and even if those decks aren't otherwise good against Tron, they can just draw that 1 card and beat you. There are aggressive decks that play Spreading Seas like Merfolk. There are control decks that play Spreading Seas that are able to put you in a bad position in that way.
Thought Seize from Dustin Gault taking Carn Liberated. Yoshihiko knew exactly that he was taking that because his other 3 cards were lands. So he actually is a little bit short on threats. So if Dustin can actually get rid of the Thought Not Seer, he's going to be a little bit clear. I mean, obviously there's a sphere in play, so there is another card he can draw from there.
Yeah, and I believe Ikawa has another sphere or or star effect in hand. And the thing about this red-green Tron deck is that it is able to top deck better than just about any other deck in the format.
Yeah, no, it's funny. One of the sayings is you can't thought seize the top of your deck, and
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things about Tron. Its draws can be so powerful. So Yoshihiko actually plays this chromatic star and goes into a Thoughtseize, taking the Soul of Temptation, leaving Dustin with a Spellstutter Sprite. So they're really both very, very reasonable short, and as you said before, Jake, that really puts the benefit, the advantage to Red Green Tron.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, is that once you get to these stages where both people run out of cards, decks that play cards like Inquisition and Thoughtseize, the red-green Tron deck punishes those decks so well because precisely as you just put it a minute ago, you cannot Thoughtseize the top of someone's library. And, it's one of the major reasons why Tron just absolutely demolishes a deck like Absent or a deck like Jund.
So Dustin actually plays a Sword of War and Peace, but no creatures yet, but he knows he had that Spellstutter Sprite. But Dustin's down to 6, so not a lot of things that need to go right for Yoshihiko to actually put him away. Going for a Sylvan Scrying, getting a Sanctum of Ugin.
And this is just making the top of his library even more powerful.
Okay. Oop. So it looks like Dustin may have actually drawn a Liliana, which would be fantastic right here.
Yeah, that'd be incredible. He'd be able to draw a card off this Thought-Knot Seer. He'd have the sword in play.
What's Yoshihiko hoping to draw right now?
And let's take a look. I believe he's probably hoping to draw something like Ugin, the Spirit Dragon. I think he's 1 mana off from being able to cast Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, and he has that land in hand. So I think Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger would be the ideal draw step here for Yoshihiko.
So our main match is ready, so we're just going to flip back to that one. So it's already started, and Yuta Takahashi has a suspended Ancestral Visions. Tony actually has a better start, I think. He had a Voice of Resurgence, and he's able to get a bird in play, but the Voice has been killed by a Fatal Push, so there's an Elemental in play.
Yeah, Voice of Resurgence is kind of Fairies' worst nightmare in a card, right? The advantage of playing a deck like Fairies is that you get to play on your opponent's turn, and Voice of Resurgence turns that into a very bad strategy. Fairies' best way to interact with a card like Voice of Resurgence is to simply kill it, but they have to do so on their own turn in order to prevent it from getting too much of an advantage, and when they do so, it leaves behind a threat, and they're an attrition-based deck. So Voice of Resurgence really just about the best card you could have against a Fairies deck.
So it looks like Yuta actually might have accidentally passed the suspend trigger. So they're just making sure that checking with the judge, making sure what's happening there. So, with Voice of Resurgence being so powerful, Tony has 4 of these.
Yeah.
Does that really turn the tide enough?
Yeah, and I think he has 4 of them in his main deck too. So I think Yuta is relying pretty heavily on finding a turn 1 discard spell that's able to deal with the Voice of Resurgence. It's certainly possible that Yuta could win games through a Voice of Resurgence, but it's going to require him to jump through a lot of hoops, and he's going to have to hope that Tony's hiccuping along the way if he wants to catch up ever.
So the match is continuing after that judge call. So Yuta's used a Polluted Delta to search, casting a Snapcaster, and using the Fatal Push flashback, killing that bird.
Now Yuta doing a fine job working his way through this stuff. I like that even though he's playing a deck that operates so well at instant speed, he still chose to do that during his main phase to deny Tony the mana that he would have gotten from Birds of Paradise.
Tony with a Scavenging Ooze, And only 2 cards, so he's actually starting to run out of resources. And he didn't attack with his elemental because he did not want to trade with that Snapcaster. Yuta has many cards in hand. And yet another Fatal Push. So Tony is actually going to pay 1 green, remove Birds of Paradise from the graveyard, gain a life, as well as the fetch land in Yuta's graveyard. Okay, so he's playing a Collective Brutality, escalating it for 1, so -2/-2, and getting cards from your hand. Fiery Justice in Tony's hand.
Wow, and that's a kind of exciting card. So that card deals 5 damage divided as you choose, and then your opponent gains 5 life. When your opponent's playing a bunch of 1 toughness creatures in their deck, that's pretty ideal kind of card.
Really efficient. 3 mana, white, green, red. But it looks like Tony's, down to 2 cards, and Yuta's almost going to be back up to like 5 or 6 cards next turn after his Ancestral. Okay, so Yuta plays a Liliana the Veil and then ticks it up. Tony's last card in his hand is actually a Restoration Angel, so he doesn't actually get that one. Yuta's forced to discard from the Liliana. So one of the good things about having that Angel is it can pressure the Liliana.
This is really great from Tony Liu. This is exactly what he needs to be doing here. Now he's going to be able to get this Liliana to a place where it's not able to kill that Restoration Angel. And you're just going to have to somehow... oh, wow. Fight his way from underneath a Blood Moon at this point.
So that's a Invocation Blood Moon from the Amonkhet block. So now the Ancestral Visions comes off. Yuta activates the discard ability of Liliana, clearing out the last card, the Eidolon of Rhetoric, out of Tony's hand. Puts another Ancestral Visions into play.
And now it's kind of a race. Tony currently winning the race, 3 power against 2 power, but these Ancestral Visions could help you to catch up quite a bit.
But the Blood Moon is actually holding Yuta off black mana, and it looks like he has 2 black cards in his hand. He's just played a Snapcaster Mage with no flashback.
And I like that a lot here from Yuta. I think he recognizes that, longer game, his mana is really stifled. So at this point, he'd need to find an island if he ever even wanted to cast a Cryptic Command. And the Liliana that's in his hand is all but a dead card. So he really needs to end this game as quickly as possible. And if Tony wants to decide to leave his Angel back and start blocking, then he can sit back and let this Ancestral Visions just tick down. Yeah,
so the 2 cards in Yuta's hand are a Tasigur, the Golden Fang, and a Liliana the Veil, both of which cannot be cast because all of the non-basic lands on Yuta's side are mountains.
So as far as exciting things go, Sigarda, Host of Herons.
Yeah.
That's a pretty exciting one.
So actually, like, the Blood Moon really effectively shut off Yuta there. I mean...
Yeah, just shut him out of the game. And I think that decks that have access to Blood Moon right now, even just 2 copies. Like, Tony just has 2 Blood Moons in his sideboard that he brings in. And they can change matchups dramatically. We've been seeing a lot more decks that play, 2 Blood Moon in the main, 3 Blood Moon in the main, maybe 2 in the board, 3 in the board. And these aren't decks that are, your typical Blood Moon deck where, Blood Moon is their plan A. They're functional and powerful decks that can simply operate under a Blood Moon. So here we're looking at Tony's deck. Tony's deck not, all in on the Blood Moon plan in any sense of anything. But he recognizes, okay, my opponent's plan is very, very soft to this.
Right.
I can simply fetch up basics. After sideboard, my deck is, not as color intensive as it is pre-sideboard. We're Blood Mooning.
And Yuta's deck actually only has 3 basics in his deck. He has 2 islands and a swamp, so he actually had no access to Cryptic Command, even if he, was lucky enough to draw the islands. So his deck might actually be a little bit soft to the Blood Moon, as you say. And he has, one of the strengths of Fairies is actually the creature lands that are available to him.
Oh, absolutely. And the Mutavaults are unbelievably important. And so are the creeping tar pits. They're very important racing tools, especially when you're tapping down your opponent's team with cryptic commands. That extra 6 and or 3 damage from a creeping tar pit on the last turn or two, just unbelievable.
Do you think the presence of the Blood Moons is really enough to turn it in the favor of the Kiki core deck? I mean, I think Game 1 was pretty convincing on the Fairies side, and I think Game 2 completely shut down by that Blood Moon.
Yeah, so here's the thing, though, about Fairies. Fairies is one of the decks that has the biggest disparity in win percentage between being on the play and being on the draw. Fairies on the play is often able to play a card like Bitter Blossom and then simply counter everything the opponent does for the rest of the game. Like Spellstutter Sprite counters Blood Moon if you played a Bitter Blossom on turn 2. Inquisition of Kozilek can pick that Blood Moon out of their hand and then let you just control the game while you're haphazardly just playing cards like Snapcaster Mage or Spellstutter Sprite that can finish off the opponent. So when you're on the play with a deck like Fairies, it's really, really hard to get back in because you need things that get in underneath that wall of, just interaction that they have.
Yeah, and and also, for Tony, this has got to be a rough round 3 matchup. I mean, you're playing a Grand Prix champion with the deck that he's famous for.
Yeah, Yuta is somebody who you never want to play against, ever in a million years. But as far as aggro control, that counterpunch style of play goes, I don't really know that there is somebody who encapsulates that better than Yuta over the last decade or so.
Okay, we're just about to start the third game, and so it looks like Yuta's actually mulliganing on the play. Tony, I think, is keeping. Yes, he's put his hand down. Looks like keeping. Mulliganing, it's one of the kind of more subtle skills in Modern. Is it particularly hard with Fairies, or does Fairies mulligan more than usual?
So Fairies is one of the few decks in Modern that mulligans really well, which is interesting. A lot of these decks in Modern are such well-oiled machines that you really need to draw something from your first basket, something from your second basket, and something from your third basket, so you can make the perfect gorgeous meal for your opponent. But Fairies is a deck that can very easily operate with as little as a 5-card hand, and Ancestral Visions is very good at helping the deck catch up. It's just it's a deck that can put down a Bitter Blossom and doesn't really need to be drawing more than 1 card a turn to be winning the game.
So Yuta keeps his 6-card hand, starts off with a Polluted Delta and a Darkslick Shores. Tony casts a turn 2 Wall of Roots. As you can see, Yuta going for the swamp very early, kind of very, worried about that Blood Moon. So Yuta casts Remand on that Wall of Roots.
Interesting, though, Yuta's deck, even though he did find that swamp, if his opponent does have the Blood Moon, he only plays 1 swamp in his deck, so he's still going to be cut off from the Liliana that he has. He's still going to be cut off from Cryptic Command because he only has 2 islands. So even fetching up basics, his deck does not operate well under a Blood Moon, even if he has Island Swamp, because he plays cards that have black and cards that have blue in their casting costs.
So Yuta suspends an Ancestral Vision. He suspended it rather than casting the Liliana in his hand. Isn't Liliana the kind of card you want to get out there as soon as possible and kind of start ticking up?
I think against a deck like Tony's, as a player like Yuta, you really want to be casting Liliana and then minusing it when they've tapped out for a creature. And the other thing that Yuta kind of wants to do here is he wants to leave open counter magic to put Tony in a situation where Tony does not want to simply cast a Blood Moon. Because if Tony were to just cast a Blood Moon here, it would be disastrous for Yuta. And right now, it doesn't look like the best situation to do that. And you're like, oh, well, my opponent already has a basic. They can fetch an island. Why would I do that right now?
Tony casts the Wall of Roots that he tried to cast last turn. He gets it into play, uses a counter, and plays a Scavenging Ooze. So now Yuta fetches with his Polluted Delta. It looks like he went for the island. Again, making sure that he's well set up for that Blood Moon. But as you say, he still would be a little bit kind of hurt by that Blood Moon.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely not the kind of card he wants to be playing against. Collective Brutality does quite a bit better here. The Ooze in play.
Yep. And the Brutality would actually kill the Ooze because even though that he has a green open with the Wall of Roots, there's no creature available for him to get rid of. Looking for a creature, hoping there was one there, but doesn't appear to be there. Yuta plays another Dark Six Shores, this one tapped. Okay. It seems like, they've been ducking and juking in the first few games. Oh.
Well then.
Magus of the Moon. Not quite as, powerful as the actual Blood Moon itself. But it does actually lock out the... Oh, no, he actually... That's one of the reasons why it isn't as powerful.
Oh, wow. Great hand here from Tony.
Yeah. Tony's like, do you want to get rid of the Japanese Court of Calling? I think Yuta might have chosen that because he could read that one.
Now, an interesting interaction there that could have come up. Tony had the Magus of the Moon in play, and Yuta killed it with Collective Brutality. However, if Yuta had a land like Watery Grave in hand, he could have played it, not taken 2 damage, had it been untapped, and then used Collective Brutality to kill.
Yeah, that's a recent change in the rulings of how Blood Moon effects work. It basically... They're mountains. It doesn't matter like all the abilities that might have happened as they come into play.
So here we again see the unbelievable power of Voice of Resurgence against a deck like Fairies. Yuta forced into a situation where he's going to have to spend 3 mana on a Planeswalker, and it's only dealing with half of a 2 mana creature from the opponent.
Yep. Then now the Elemental's just freshly there to actually do the final hit on Liliana. Wow. Tony actually drew a Blood Moon in the turn in the middle, and that's really, really tough for Yuta because he has another Liliana in his hand, but as we said before, he does not have a second black that he can find, so that Liliana is basically gone for the entire game.
Yeah, he even has a Cryptic Command in hand, which is also gone for the rest of the game. So these Blood Moons out of Tony's deck are just doing an incredible amount of work. I've been so impressed with Blood Moon recently. I actually wrote a column about Blood Moon that got published yesterday about decks in Modern that play a few copies of Blood Moon, where it's just like kind of a side plan.
So Yuta draws a Fatal Push. He's Fatal Pushing I think, the Noble Hierarch. In response, Tony is courting for 3. No, 2. And goes for the second Voice of Resurgence, and Yuta knows that he's basically locked out of the game because of the Blood Moon, and that's it for Yuta. It's one of the things I think Yuta just hoped that he did not rip that Blood Moon off the top of the deck, but
yeah, and that's the thing is when you're playing against a deck that has it, you have to respect it at all times. And Yuta's deck, yes, it operates at instant speed. Yes, normally when you're playing against these Blood Moon strategies, you can leave open mana, you can counter it, you can make them discard it early. But when your opponent has cards like Court of Calling and a bunch of cards that interact on your turn, or cards like Voice of Resurgence that force you to do things on your turn, then that's going to give them breathing room to resolve that Blood Moon against you.
So now we're actually moving into one of our other feature matches, Lee Livingston versus Lewis Williams. Lee Livingston with Gift Storm, and Lewis Williams with a fairly unusual deck, Mono White Devotion. What does this deck actually do, Jake?
So I believe Craig Wesco has actually been streaming this deck quite a bit as of late. And what he wants to do with this deck is he wants to use Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, with cards that have a lot, or cards like Heliod, God of the Sun, and just a lot of white mana symbols. And he even plays Border Post with Knight of the White Orchid.
Oh, wow.
And Path to Exile. So, just all of the hits of people who have loved tiny little bits of value. So there's big payoff here in the form of Myojin of Cleansing Fire. He's got payoff in the form of Heliod, Gone of the Sun. He has Elish Norn. He has, Karn. Elspeth. Just big spells.
So we came in like game 3, so they've already sideboarded. Lewis actually has a Rest in Peace, which does hurt the Storm deck. Does rely on the graveyard somewhat with Past in Flames.
Yeah, I think, Past in Flames is almost necessary for the newer versions of the Storm deck to go off. It's possible for them to do it without it, but, as somebody who has, played cards like Meddling Mage and whatnot, when you're trying to prevent them from going off on a specific turn, Past in Flames is one of the best possible cards you can get.
So Lee actually remands the Heliod back to Lewis's hand. It's obviously only a temporary fix.
Yeah, it's a great feeling, though, to remand a card that costs 4 mana because...
Oh, wow. He had so much extra mana from, when the Boris Reckoner was in play that he was actually just able to recast the Heliod.
Yeah. That's the power of Nykthos. Nykthos is a card that I expected to have more of a splash in Modern than it has, actually.
Okay, so Baral, Chief of Compliance on Lee's side. This is so the Storm deck runs a few cost reducers that uses Baral, Electromancer. Is it really necessary for them to have one in play to go off, or can they?
They can do it without it, but those cards make things much more powerful. A card like Manamorphose, which essentially cycles if you don't have one of those in play, becomes a ritual that also draws you cards. A card like Gifts Ungiven, when you're casting it for 3 mana and then finding, the correct stack of 4 in order to win the game. These cards that reduce costs are just so powerful in making, things like Pyretic Ritual into, Dark Rituals. They're one of the most necessary pieces to the combo deck.
So Lewis, using Nykthos, funnily enough, actually getting the same amount of mana he used to tap it, but he does wash it into white mana. Lee paying only 1 mana for the remand because of Baral.
Not only that, but he also gets the cycle thanks to Baral now. And what Lee Livingston is trying to do now is it looks like he has Echoing Truth in hand. And because Lewis is playing mono white, he does not have the ability to, counter spells from Lee Livingston. So Lee Livingston can set up a turn where on Lewis Williams' end step, he can use Echoing Truth to return Rest in Peace to his hand, and then he can go off on the following turn using that Baral. Oh, he's using the Echoing Truth now to bounce both Oblivion Rings.
And then saving the Baral.
Yeah, so he used that instead of a negate there.
So Lee Livingston untaps has really an open turn.
Yeah, so Lee now, let's see what he can put together.
Attacks with Baral, just to show him who's boss right here.
Yeah. With the Rest in Peace in play, it's really hard for Lee to win this game. Surprised he was as aggressive as he was with the Echoing Truth there. He could have used Negate to save the Baral also.
So Lewis Williams actually drew a Thalia's Lancers. Now, that is a card that I did not expect to see in Modern.
It's a really powerful card. It's kind of like it's a 5-mana Stoneforge Mystic that finds you giant things that work well with your Nykthos. And a card like that in a devotion-style strategy is just so powerful because it provides you the longevity that you're really going for.
Yeah. So usually when a Storm deck is kind of suppressed with a Rest in Peace, it has some backup plans. Instead of trying to Grape Shot, it uses Empty the Warrens.
Yeah.
It's how often do you think that they go off versus with the Empty versus the Grape Shot, or do they always try and go for the Empty after sideboarding?
I think that it largely depends on the matchup. I'm not overwhelmingly familiar with the mono white devotion deck, but
Yeah.
I personally feel that, he probably sideboarded in some number of Empty the Warrens here. And cycling this much, he's going to find a way to win this game at some point.
So Lewis plays a Oblivion Ring, but it gets remanded. Oh, okay, so he plays a second Nykthos, but that's legendary, so he gets rid of the old one. Looks like he's going to probably cast that Oblivion Ring again. Yep. And this time it's negated.
Does find the empty.
Yep. So now Lee has the Empty the Warrant, has quite a few rituals in his hand, so he actually may try and go off this turn.
I imagine he will. I think that, while it is entirely possible that his opponent has some sort of board sweeper, there's, not that much time left in the round. There's, the pressure's on him kind of to win the game.
So what Lee's doing is actually, there's a couple things. One is a storm counter, so he actually has a card to count to indicate how much storm he's on spell-wise, and then he has a red mana and a blue mana pool basically to visually show and keep track of what's happening in the turn, which is helpful for us too.
Yeah. So now he plays a pair of rituals thanks to Baral. Both of these are producing 3 red mana for 1 red mana, so he goes up 2 from each of them. Then Manamorphose also generates some mana here, and it's going to allow Lee to draw a card. Finds another ritual here of the desperate kind. Manamorphose again.
Another Manamorphose. So now Storm is up to 6. He draws yet another ritual. A desperate one at that. And so it looks like Lee's hand is Desperate Ritual, another Baral, and an Empty. So if he casts the Desperate Ritual, it goes up to 7 spells. But he's actually keeping one of the rituals. Why do you think he's going to keep that last ritual rather than cast it this time?
He may just want to give himself the breathing room to maybe go off again if he needs to in, some very large number of turns. I'm not really sure, though. I think that it's probably worthwhile to play those 2 extra spells here. He's making 14 goblins, I believe, at this point.
That's right.
And if he had played the other Baral and that last ritual, then he would have made 18 goblins, and he would have also had the Baral in play, and then he would have been threatening 19 damage on the following turn and really forced Lewis's hand about how he played.
Yeah, it would have given Lewis 1 turn to live rather than what's likely to be 2 turns now.
Yeah, and I think that Lewis, for what it's worth, basically any play he makes in this following turn is going to prevent him from dying to that 19 points of power on Lee's side of the board. I just think that, the play that he made was all in enough that he might as well have just gone pure all in.
Right. I mean, the chances that he's actually able to re-go off in a few recent turns. I mean, I guess he could be worried about some sort of board sweeper just in case of that kind of thing. Thyles Lancers from Lewis. What does Lewis have that could help him in this situation?
Myojin of Cleansing Fire.
So how many mana is Myojin of Cleansing Fire?
I think it's 7
or 8?
It's 8, I believe, right?
Okay.
Oh, Elish Norn is a very nice one at 7 mana. Elish Norn, can simply demolish every single goblin on Lee's side of the board.
Yeah, and the Baral would be a 0-1, so Lee would basically lose all his offense. So
Lewis does need 1 additional mana, however, in order to cast that Elspeth. Or, I'm sorry, that Elish Norn. The Field Mist Border Post has whiteness casting cost. You're right. Yeah, so he's there. He's
there, and actually, he can actually block with, and the Helid and the Thyles Lancers can actually block because there are 5 devotion. And so it wouldn't have made a difference actually if he tried to go off the previous turn. He didn't have quite enough creatures to actually be lethal.
It would not have made a difference. The Elishnorn would still be coming down this turn.
Funnily enough, he actually drew another empty the Warrens, but Elishnorn's going to be able to deal with that pretty effectively.
And permanently. I mean, he already used one way to get permanents off the board with the Echoing Truth, and now he's going to have to try to find another copy in his deck.
So Lewis is likely to...
I can't imagine he does anything other than cast Elishnorn.
Yeah. And it really could be that kind of it, because there's not a lot of answers that Lee has. Baral's a 0-1, so can chump. So Lewis is actually attacking with some large creatures. So the Thylax Lance is a 6-6 now. The Heliod is a 7-8.
Yeah. These guys are very, very large at this point.
Right. I mean, he has lethal next turn, so it actually Lee's basically... I mean, even if he can actually bounce the Elishnorn, he can just recast it the turn after. So cast the pieces of the puzzle. Really hoping for a miracle. I don't know if there's anything that he'd actually do. And the two spells he gets are Metamorphose and a Desperate Ritual. And I don't think he has a way of actually... I think he's just going through the motions a little bit here. Getting 3 red mana from the Desperate Ritual. He's cast 2 spells. Another Desperate Ritual.
If he had Metamorphose first, then he could have Splice.
Metamorphose, really just hoping to whatever the cards on top of here. Who is the Seer of Visions?
Oh, the sweat is real.
And I think that's it for him because he's got 2 lands on top. Now he can put it on the bottom, but I don't think he's going to have another turn.
I mean, he really needs to find a Grape Shot here, but...
He's able to cast. But the Elishnorn Heliod Thales Lands' army wins. And so Mono White Devotion, just a deck that has a really, really kind of strange game against a lot of these decks. Just a lot of powerful legends and just peculiar cards that you don't really see in any other decks.
Yeah. Tons of silver bullets and weird prison-y type cards, if you will.
Okay, yeah, we'll be back right after these ads.